Beyond the Sahara, the untold story of Rome's African expeditions. In 19 BCE, a Roman centurion named Cornelius Balbus returned to Rome with something extraordinary. Not gold, not slaves, but stories. Stories of cities beyond the Great Desert, where people rode animals tall as houses, of rivers that flowed backwards, and of kingdoms so wealthy they used precious stones as common currency. His triumph was celebrated with rare honors, yet what he had witnessed would haunt Roman imagination for centuries. The question that tantalized emperors and terrified generals alike: what lay beyond the scorching veil of the Sahara? The expedition that changed everything. Most people assume Roman Africa meant the familiar Mediterranean coastline: Egypt, Libya, Tunisia. But declassified archaeological evidence from the past 2 decades reveals a far more audacious truth. The Romans didn't just dabble at Africa's edges. They mounted systematic expeditions that penetrated deeper into the continent than any European power would manage again until the 19th century. The breakthrough came during Nero's reign, around 62 CE. 2 centurions, whose names history has frustratingly obscured, received the emperor's direct commission: find the source of the Nile. What they discovered instead would reshape Roman understanding of geography forever. Following ancient trade routes, they encountered the kingdom of Kush. But this wasn't the Kush of textbook footnotes. This was a sophisticated empire with iron technology, monumental architecture, and something that made Roman merchants' eyes gleam with avarice: vast gold mines that made Egypt's wealth seem modest. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. The Romans didn't conquer Kush. They negotiated with it. The secret alliance, recent papyrus discoveries in Oxyrhynchus, have unveiled correspondence that reads like ancient espionage fiction. Roman governors in Egypt were maintaining regular diplomatic contact with Kushite royalty, exchanging not just trade goods, but military intelligence. The Kushites possessed something Rome desperately needed: detailed knowledge of interior African trade networks, and, more crucially, the locations of what Roman sources cryptically called the elephant roads. These weren't paths for hunting elephants. They were sophisticated commercial highways that connected Mediterranean markets with sub-Saharan Africa. Archaeological evidence from sites in modern-day Chad and Niger shows Roman coins, pottery, and metalwork dating from the 1st to 4th centuries CE. But the most stunning discovery came in 2019. A Roman military camp, complete with defensive walls and standard barracks layouts, found nearly 800 miles south of the traditional Roman frontier. The mystery of the Lost Legion. This brings us to one of history's most tantalizing puzzles: the fate of the 3 Augusta Legion's desert detachment. Military records show that in 86 CE, a full cohort of 600 men was dispatched from their base in Algeria on a reconnaissance mission into the Sahara. They were expected back within 6 months. They never returned. For over a century, this was dismissed as another casualty of desert warfare. Men lost to heat, thirst, and hostile tribes. But indigenous oral traditions from the Sahel tell a different story entirely. Griots, traditional West African storytellers whose oral histories span millennia, speak of white warriors from the north, who arrived with strange weapons and established a settlement near what is now the bend of the Niger River. The correlation is impossible to ignore. Roman military artifacts found in Mali, dating to the late 1st century CE, match exactly with equipment used by the 3 Augusta Legion. More provocatively, genetic studies of certain Malian populations show distinctly Mediterranean markers that first appeared in the population roughly 2,000 years ago. But why would Rome risk such dangerous expeditions? The answer lies in a commodity more precious than gold: salt. Not ordinary salt, but the legendary pink salt of the Sahara, which was literally worth its weight in precious metals in ancient Rome. Roman texts describe salt so pure and flavorful that it was reserved exclusively for imperial banquets. More significantly, Roman explorers had learned of something that would make modern economists gasp: a continental trade network more sophisticated than anything Europe would create until the Renaissance. African kingdoms were conducting international commerce on a scale that dwarfed Roman operations. They had standardized weights, currency systems, and commercial laws that governed trade from Morocco to Ethiopia. The Garamantes civilization, based in what is now Libya's Fezzan region, operated the ancient world's most advanced irrigation system. Their capital, Garama, was a cosmopolitan hub where Roman merchants rubbed shoulders with traders from India, Persia, and the African interior. Archaeological excavations reveal that Garamantian warehouses contained goods from across the known world: Chinese silk, Indian spices, Scandinavian amber, and Roman wine. The technology gap that wasn't perhaps most surprising is what Roman expeditionaries found regarding African technology. Far from the primitive societies depicted in later European accounts, Romans encountered civilizations with metallurgy that, in some cases, surpassed their own. The Nox civilization had been producing sophisticated ironwork for centuries before Rome was founded. Ethiopian kingdoms possessed steelworking techniques that wouldn't reach Europe for another 1,000 years. Roman military reports, preserved in the British Museum's collection of Egyptian papyri, describe African cavalry units using stirrups, a technology Romans wouldn't adopt for another 400 years. They encountered fortified cities with architectural innovations that Roman engineers studied and adapted. The famous Roman concrete might have been influenced by building techniques observed in Nubian construction. The climate conspiracy. But perhaps the most extraordinary aspect of Roman African exploration was timing. Modern climate research reveals that during the Roman warm period, roughly 250 BCE to 400 CE, the Sahara was dramatically different from today's landscape. Satellite archaeology has identified the remnants of ancient lakes, rivers, and vegetation patterns that would have made trans-Saharan travel not just possible, but relatively comfortable. Roman explorers weren't crossing the brutal desert wasteland we know today. They were navigating a landscape of seasonal rivers, grasslands, and established watering stations. This explains how relatively small Roman detachments could venture so far into the interior. They weren't conquering hostile wilderness. They were following established trade routes through a landscape that supported substantial populations. The cover-up. So why don't our textbooks mention Rome's deep African expeditions? The answer reveals the political complexities of imperial expansion. Rome's African ventures were never official conquests. They were intelligence operations, trade missions, and diplomatic contacts that occurred in the shadowy margins of official policy. Moreover, many records were deliberately suppressed. Later Roman historians, writing during periods of economic decline, had little interest in publicizing the wealth and sophistication of African kingdoms that Rome had failed to conquer. The narrative of Roman superiority was better served by depicting Africa as an unknown wilderness, rather than acknowledging that Roman explorers had encountered civilizations that, in many ways, surpassed their own. The legacy hidden in plain sight. Today, genetic markers, linguistic borrowings, architectural techniques, and trade goods scattered across Africa tell the story that official Roman histories concealed. Roman coins turn up in archaeological sites from Senegal to Somalia. Latin words appear in languages across the African continent. Roman construction techniques influenced building styles from Morocco to Zimbabwe. The Romans didn't just explore deeper into Africa. They integrated with it in ways that challenged their own assumptions about civilization, wealth, and power. They discovered a continent that was not a frontier to be conquered, but a partner in the ancient world's most sophisticated commercial and cultural networks. The real question isn't whether Romans explored deep into Africa. It's why we've taken so long to recognize what they found there.